Hi, welcome to Back2Hoops. Today we're going to be doing a mailbag episode. It's a chance that you've obviously had to send in your questions that we can ask, obviously, my two other colleagues here. First off, I'm sure they want to say something about themselves. James?
Hi, I'm James. I'm the creator of Back2Hoops. I'm a former Team UK head coach and currently play for Velociraptors QC.
And Jay?
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm the current head coach of Team UK, and I also play for Velociraptors QC.
Fantastic. So we should be able to get all these questions answered then between the pair of you. So we've got quite a range of questions. I'm just going to get straight into it. Deciding on positions. When someone's starting out, what is it they've got to think about and assess? What attributes, skills are they thinking about to decide, do I want to be a beater? Do I want to be a chaser? Where is it I best fit?
For me, I think it's about, I think when you go to your taster session, at least for the first couple of weeks, it's difficult to commit to a position, I think, because basically you don't know what's going on within the full realm of the game. When we were at university, it was basically what position people enjoyed the most. I think it's really unfair to say to someone new to the sport, we need beaters, so you're going to be a beater. If that person wants to chase, then I think, especially if they're new, then it's only fair to let them chase. But I think it's about finding what you enjoy, playing a couple of games in both positions. So when I was at Bangor, I tried all four positions and then settled on chaser because it was the one that I enjoyed the most. And then as you play for a little bit longer, you can adapt to try and play the other positions. But for me, it's just about enjoyment. I think if your team needs a position, it needs to come from established players because they can afford to make the change rather than shoehorning in a fresher. As well, beating is so much harder than chasing. I find like any idiot can quaffle play, but beating well requires a bit more nuance and a bit more awareness, I find.
I think having it be a bit of a, I'd recommend thoroughly trying all the positions when you first start before you kind of get typecast. Yeah, because you don't know what you're going to like until you've done it, really, especially something so varied. I kind of knew I wanted to be a chaser because it appealed to the sort of sport background I already had. But now I wish I'd kind of been a beater because throwing a bludger at someone's really fun. So yeah, trying it out to start with, getting them to have an idea, especially if you say you're a new club or if they're a new player, them enjoying themselves is way more likely for them to come back than you going, oi, you chuck this ball at people when they don't want to do that. They're going to go away and they're not going to come back. They're going to go find a sport that lets them do it. As Jay said, if you do need a certain role on pitch, like you are short of beaters, you are short of keepers or whatever, then I think it's on your experienced players who have a better knowledge of the game to fill in, adapt, and then try to cultivate people over the time. But you can't make someone do it straight away because they just won't stick with the game. They'll literally do anything else.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. So seeing as you're talking about obviously getting into those sort of roles and different positions, if you're not necessarily that specific body type. So we had a question basically asking if you're short and skinny, you can tell this isn't a question I wrote. How can you become more effective at driving, or what sort of tips or things can you do if you're not that sort of larger person? Should we start with Jay again?
Yeah, so I obviously I'm quite a prototypical driving player, being quite a large framed man. But I think a misconception that I'd like to clear up is when people say driving, that literally just means carrying the ball on foot towards the hoops, trying to score. A lot of people see driving as like trucking over the team and dunking it in and like being a driver. Whereas when you drive, what we actually mean is ball in hand, carrying the ball towards the hoop. Anyone can drive. It's just how effectively you do it. James, did you want to say some ways to be a more effective driver? Also a bit smaller.
So I'm on the smaller end of what would be considered a typical driver. Obviously, I'm still bigger than a lot of people, but I'm on the smaller side of that. I think a lot of it is playing to your skill set. If you are 5'3" and 60 kilos, the chance of you running over somebody is a lot slimmer, a lot smaller. So finding a different way of getting around and having the same end goal is important. So working on your agility, your ability to sidestep or spin through contact is just as effective as someone going over the top of them. And you can find a lot of tutorials online for how to work your sidestep. All In do an excellent video on agility and spinning into and out of contact. Other things you can work on is your pace, like your actual speed. You'll see this, a smaller person has a good advantage on you, Dan, if they are just much faster. And speed is honestly something you can develop. You can resistance run, you can work on that initial step, and spacing. So just because you're smaller and can't necessarily go over the top of somebody doesn't mean you can't get past them. You just get past them in a slightly different way. A lot of it is confidence, taking the ball on the front foot, committing to an action early, not being too hesitant and backwards, because the second you go like this, you're going to get knocked, you're going to get hit. So taking the ball on the front foot, making an action, and working on your lateral, your side-to-side movement will massively help in that regard. But yeah, confidence is key, I think.
Cool. Seeing as you mentioned it there, you're talking about obviously when you get the ball. What would you say, is there any advice in terms of catching balls that are thrown at you very fast or hard balls? I think this is chaser-wise, but maybe it's a beta question as well.
I mean, you need to have your body.
So I think. Go on.
I think you need to have your body behind the ball. Like, try to catch a rocket above your head like this, or like to the side at the edge of your wingspan. That's not going to happen, and it gives you no recovery time either if you fumble it. Whereas if you can position your body behind the ball, you have a stronger brace. You're able to bring it into your chest. Okay, bringing your arms in towards you absorbs some of the impact. It's how you catch a cricket ball, and obviously those go pretty damn hard. Yeah, so hands behind the ball, body behind the ball, and absorb the pressure. Don't be trying to claw at it and snap at it. Behind it is key, I would suggest. Okay.
Yeah, for me, it's about getting you very similar, but your shoulders facing the ball. So a lot of the time when I play, I allow my shoulders to dictate my direction. And I think if my shoulders are facing the direction that something is either coming from or I like to go, there's a very good chance that I'm going to get there because I can use my momentum through my shoulders. And I think you've got a much bigger chance, even if the ball's to the side, if your shoulders are facing the same direction, then you can make this reaction a lot easier. A lot of people try the side catch without moving their shoulders. So they're trying to catch away from their body, and that's where they fumble it. And another thing, it seems really silly, but just keeping your eye on the ball. A lot of people assume they're going to catch it and let their eye drift, and that's when fumbles happen. You want to be following the path of the ball the entire time, so your body and your hands can react to it.
When I read this question that was sent to us, the first thing I thought was, well, if your teammate keeps throwing at you really fast, just tell him not to throw it so fast. I don't know if that is that just me going. If you don't need to throw it that hard. It
depends if it's meant to be it's like a bit of both, right? Because it might be that it's too fast for you as a receiver to catch it, but it might be the speed it needs to be to get past the defender. Yeah. So it's a bit of both. So communication is key. So there's no point throwing the pass if the other person's not going to catch it because it's just going to go on the ground. But that's on both people. The receiver to work on their hands to get better at catching, and the distributor, the person throwing it, thinking, what's actually going to give me the highest chance of this pass completing? Is it reduce it slightly and increase the chance of it being intercepted slightly, but massively increase the chance of them throwing it? So it's a give and take for definite.
Okay. So obviously these sort of questions are all around personal development. Someone's just been getting into the sport. They've maybe just been to their first fixture tournament and they've gone, I really like this. I want to get better now. Where would you be saying, like, if you were to give me one or two games that you think that they should maybe try and find online to have a little look at to help them out with their improvement?
So improve what they're doing, do you mean? Or just to get them kind of to see what the game could be played like?
Yeah.
So if I wanted,
just to see, like,
if I was trying to send someone to go, this is what Quidditch can be like, you know, I'd be sending them to MLQ Games. It's an American-run organisation, kind of like the UK's QPL, where the best players in the US are playing, and the standard of play is really high. The game's quite exciting. Admittedly, the rules are a little different, but the fundamentals of the game, in terms of technical skills, are all there. It's what a lot of highlight reels are made from and things like that. So yeah, I'd be sending them to MLQ if I wanted them just to see what Quidditch can aspire to be.
cool. Jay?
I'm a big fan of like Texas Quidditch playing in any tournament really. Yeah, I love Texas Quidditch. But basically any USQ filmed footage for a few reasons. The first reason is that it's of a higher standard usually, but the second reason is it's just quite well filmed. I think a lot of
footage is
players
massive.
get put off by really poor film, and a lot of really great games in the UK are filmed really poorly, so the game looks terrible. Whereas if you look at your MLQs, your QPLs, your US Cups, they're all filmed really well, which adds a lot more spectacle to it, and the commentator's really good, and it's a lot more engaging. So that's the direction that I'd be sending them in, because I find Quidditch really hard to watch if it's a low quality video, and that really saps my enjoyment out of it. And at the end of the day, especially if someone's starting, I want them watching film for fun and entertainment. I don't want them to turn into me, James and Lucy and be boring when they watch film from the off. I want them to watch games and appreciate games and, you know, the drama and the nuance and the fun that comes with them, rather than trying to dissect, you know, how is this Baylor zone adjusted to a spread offense? Because it actually doesn't matter when you start. You just want to watch it for fun.
Yeah, fantastic. And then the sort of last one in this sort of section, you're starting on the bench. How do you...
I'll take this one, James, don't worry.
How do you make an impact to sort of stop yourself from feeling after you're coming off going, oh, I'm not really sure if I did anything there? What would,
biggest impact I've ever made as a sub was just getting sent off straight away. I like to think I had quite the impact on my team. But
we did play better afterwards.
Yeah, being a bench player is really tough, and a lot of people like settled themselves into the role of being a bench player, but it's still hard to accept. So, like, I like to think of myself as quite a big club man. I'm a club first, team first sort of player, but I still like to play. And being bench sucks. Everyone knows that. There's a few things you can do off the pitch. You've got to make yourself as useful as possible, like doing the sewer jobs, handing out water, make sure everyone's all right, make sure everyone stays warm, cheering for your team. You know, build the positivity. And secondly, when you go on pitch, don't go on pitch thinking, I'm going to make a play, I'm going to win the game for us. Because there's been games when I was, a younger, less experienced player, where I'd get subbed on and think, I've got to do some absolute mad lad stuff to get noticed here and turn the game. You just end up making yourself look like an idiot, making a mistake. You want to go on, just try and play your game the best way you can. All right. If you're a sub, you're not going to be the best player on the team. That's fine. All right. People want you to go on, do a job, do your role. If your role is make a couple of passes, make a couple of catches and sub off, great. What people don't want is you to sub on and think, I've got to score 6 goals to make it look like I'm a vital part of this team. Okay. Know what your role is. Have the conversation with your coaches. Have the conversation with your captain. All right. It's on them for you to know what your job is when you go on. Maybe your job is to go on and like just be a tackle machine. Maybe it's to be a receiver, but don't convince yourself that you need to go on and have a worldie. Just go on and try and play your best. Because once you're relaxed, that's when you're going to play your best games, I think.
Cool. So I think that last part, I think is really important. Part. Your coach should, or your sub-box manager, or whoever is doing that role, should be telling you what is expected of you in this next stint when you're about to go on. Ideally, we live in a world where we're subbing for a tactical reason rather than a fitness reason. That's ideally the world we would live in. I appreciate we don't necessarily. But yeah, getting your coach to tell you what is expected of you. Are you expected to be this? What is it that you're adding to the pitch they should be able to tell you? And if they can't tell you that, they need to go away and look at that for themselves for the next time. Like, because they should be subbing you on with a reason, with a game plan, not just because the person ahead of you on your sub queue is tired.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That sort of brings us straight into the next section as well, which sort of that coaching, team development, mindset idea. You've mentioned about sub rotation, and I think you've done. Obviously, there's other little bits out there on the website, right? On this. What about picking your starting lineup, though? How are you gonna What's your approach in terms of who's going to be the first 6 people there?
I mean, I don't think we've done this enough, but it's something I would like to see more of honestly, just picking your fastest people to get a ball. Like, I want even if they're not necessarily, the example is be beaters. I want bludge control off the start. I'd rather have bludge control than the ball, if I'm honest. So I'd pick my fastest people to go run for the balls and then sub off immediately. You see it a lot more in other countries than we see it in the UK. Yeah, especially if you've got your fast person running for the quaffle, great, got it. Next to going for the bludgers, even if they're not beaters, they don't have to throw the ball if they win. Go sub off straight away. That's fine. You're in no worse position than if a slower beater had run for the ball and also lost. Like, at worst, it's 15 seconds of the game.
Yeah, for me, I completely agree. You want your fastest set on first. And then from that, it's just about switching straight into game plans. So I'm a big fan of pods. I functionally 2 chaser pods, 2 beater pods, and then what I call flex players that go between the 2. But I have a chaser pod of one style, chaser pod of another style, flex players that can do a bit of both, a beating pod that is one style primarily, a beating pod which might be a bit different, and then a flex players that go between the 2 pods. And you can mix and match, but that makes it really useful. Instead of saying, I want you, and you just say red pod, you're on. Red pod know that it's their time to go. They know who the core of red pod are. They know who the backup players are for red pod, and the flex players are always ready. Going on with a game plan and a style in mind, really useful. Putting your best players on might yield a worse result than putting on a group of players that play together the best.
Cool. Okay, so when it comes to sort of organising the team and things like that, I'm not sure, maybe this could be a sort of a mini episode. But it's talking about warm-ups, both in competitions and in training sessions. What's good, what's bad, and how do you time it for the start of for the game? Do you want to answer that now, or a different?
Can I just say one thing on that?
Yeah.
Standing still, doing some stretches, absolutely pointless. It breaks my heart as a human being when I see people like, right now, big game coming up, let's all warm up, and they stand in a circle doing some stretches and then chuck a ball. I'm like, no, you want to do dynamic, moving stretches. You want to be moving your body, okay, in any way. Jog, stretch on the move, but don't just stand there and give it a bit of this. Oh, look at me, I'm an athlete. You need to do that a bit, but don't have only that, okay? There's hundreds of warm-ups for rugby, basketball, hockey, lacrosse, American football that involve dynamic movements that you can do online. And then I'd say it's just about doing some half courts or just getting people used to throwing and handling the ball. Quidditch is tough because it doesn't always run to time. But I think just getting people used to playing with the ball in their hands is really vital, and getting used to the balls you're using in game. As a quaffle player, there is nothing worse than practicing, with your club ball that you love, you're married to, and then you've not touched the game ball.
You're playing with a rock.
You pick it up and you're like, well, I can't actually hold this because it's so inflated, but no one's decided to check before the game. Checking the game ball is important.
The one thing for warm-up I would suggest is making sure that, ideally everybody knows, but definitely your coach knows correct form. There's no point doing a stretch if it's not stretching. Like, you need to be able to go around and correct. Like, if you're doing a lunge or, bit of this, whatever, right, it's not doing anything. You're just holding your arm in a position at this point. Ooh, stretching. Actually make sure what you're doing is fit for purpose. Like, there are lots of tutorials online, as Joe said, videos and whatever. Get the basics, do them right. Otherwise, you're going to hurt yourself.
Okay, cool. So you've done your warm up. The game has started, and you notice from your subspin that maybe there's an issue on pitch. I don't know, maybe a player's wearing a watch, but which has happened, I think, for everyone. Your team is broken gender, which I think pretty much everyone that's ever played has accidentally done that. How are you setting it up? Because obviously you're the coach. If you start shouting, you need to sub because of this, the refs can hear, then you get penalties called against you. What's your sort of play on that? What's your advice there?
So my way of doing this is it goes before the game starts, like before the tournament starts, whatever. Your players need to be used to being just called off, like for subbing for that sort of stuff. So you don't, like say, don't have to say the reason we're subbing is for this, Y, Z, drawing attention to a foul. So having one person instructing X person sub off, right, and making sure they do it. If you can't get it straight away, get the nearest person to the pitch to sub off and sub somebody on with the message. Yeah, so it might be that person over in the top right corner of the pitch is wearing their watch. No one's noticed yet, but it's going to get noticed. They can't hear me. I'm not going to shout, Jay, take off your watch. What I'm going to do is sub somebody. I'm either just going to say, Jay, sub, and if he doesn't hear me, sub the nearest player on with the message, go and tell them they need to do this. That's how I like to communicate stuff onto the pitch. I don't like a load of people on my sideline shouting, roaring, whatever. I want them to just be focused on the game, and then so that the people on pitch can listen to my voice and the instruction that I'm trying to give them. Yeah, that's how I approach it. Try and either me shout it as one singular voice or subbing somebody on with the instruction.
I'm exactly the same. Yeah, it's either like if they're not listening to me, then there's systemic issues within the team. If I'm the coach and they're not listening, then there's other things that need to be addressed. If they can't hear me, then it is sending someone on. If it's desperate, you can afford to be a bit more vocal if it's something that has to change. If it's something minor that you think the referee won't notice, you can always call a cheeky timeout and then adjust it then. Obviously, I wouldn't advocate such heinous practice. I don't know what Olympians would have to say about that if they heard me say it about Lass. It's done now. But yeah, it's just about making the change happen as quickly as possible. But if people aren't listening to the coach, then there's much bigger issues. In terms of on like getting instructions onto the pitch, so maybe it's not a rule violation, but it's a tactical change. I like I say, I like having my one voice shouting or whoever the one person is shouting. And having the next sub-line ready with their instructions to sub on. When I'm on pitch and I want something to change, is every time the ball goes dead, is be having the conversation of what we're doing next, what we need to be doing. So if we've run through and we've scored, all right, I don't really want to just drop it through the hoop. I want it to be gone so that I have time when I've scored and I'm going back to my team. Yeah, well done. Woo, great. Sod that. Get together very quickly, just go through who's going point, who's going where, what is our next plan, how are we next set up, and that's a really good opportunity to do that. Same with when any time the ball goes missing, it's gone long off the pitch, stop, right? Chat about what you're going to do, communicate the next step in the plan, right? That can be one person going over to the sideline to hear the message, or if the person who's got the message on pitch already having that conversation on.
Yeah, that was going to be the next question about sort of changing tactics, but you've answered it there already as well, so that's awesome. If you had to pick out one common mistake that a new team would make, sort of when they're going to tournaments or things like that, what do you think it is? Something for them to maybe be aware of.
Probably dropping the ball, Dad. If I'm perfectly honest, that's a mistake I see quite a lot. I think it is pre-game prep. Is something that I see done quite badly. Players not warming up, players not throwing the ball, players not getting in the right headspace. For me, I appreciate a lot of people, play for the good times and play for fun, but you still need to be focused, and a lot of people aren't focused. I think captains and coaches need to do a better job of corralling their team and getting them to find the zone and staying there. because it can be really easy to, talk to your team, motivate them, and after 5 minutes they're off playing football or knocking about or being silly again. So I think the common mistake is not coming together as a team soon enough before a game, and then not warming up and going through your lines and your rotations and your warm up properly. I'd probably say
For me, I think it's, for newer teams especially, is trying to pick a game plan or a tactic that doesn't suit who they've got. So carbon copying a thing they've seen online or they've heard about and going, we're going to play like this, and it's like fourth-hand information because they've heard it from a friend who's watched it on a thing, who saw someone else practice it once, and it just gets delineated down, and then they're trying something that actually is being executed poorly because they haven't got a good enough understanding of it, or it just honestly just doesn't fit who they've got. They're trying to play an LQC style, ping the ball to the four corners of the pitch style offense and play when they can only pass the ball half that distance. But it's because it's how they quote unquote should play. And same with like defensive structures. If you don't have somebody who can make a point defense stop, leaving them as a one-person defense is not good enough. So yeah, I think that's for me. It's an ill-fitting tactic applied to a team is the biggest mistake I see teams do.
Cool. Yeah. I've got one question here about teaching contact, but I know we've got a whole section about that coming up when we can actually make contact. So I'm going to leave that one. Just to finish with the sort of coaching side of it, so what sort of coaches have kind of inspired you both and players as well, both in and out of Quidditch? I know Jay's got a lot of inspirations from outside. I was wondering about you as well, James.
So not necessarily coaching inside Quidditch. I like to try and think I pick up stuff that I see that I think doesn't work or would work for certain people a bit. The people I want to kind of emulate though are honestly, people like Ferguson, the way he controls his team, and like Alex Ferguson controls everything about his club. He was manager of United. Same to a degree with Mourinho. I think the siege mentality that he creates within his teams, at least for the first season before they all hate each other, is really good. Obviously, it doesn't work out long term. But yeah, I like structure. I like anything. I like the control of it. So anyone who can show me how to do that better and more effectively is helpful, if I'm honest.
Cool. Jay?
So I do lots of reading about sport and coaching, lots. I've had a lot of inspirations. I started off as quite not a very personable, and I was quite an unemotional coach. But as I grew up and as I sort of found my role within leadership in Quidditch, I think I am quite an emotional leader. I think most players at Team UK and for Raptors would say that I'm a very emotional leader in terms of the buttons that I lean on, but also the mental side of the game. There's a lot of stuff that I do under the hood of the car to ensure that my teams succeed. They're not always aware that I'm doing it, but that's just part of the psychology that I'm building for. To rattle off some coaches, a lot of mine are American sports, but from American football, Vince Lombardi, who was the coach of the Green Bay Packers when they won all the Super Bowls back in the days, probably my favourite coach ever. He was a really emotional leader. He was someone who was a player that was on a really good team, but wasn't the core part of it, and was quite restricted in what he could contribute. And a lot of people didn't see him as the vital part of his team, even though he played quite a big role in their leadership and driving them forward. So obviously no parallels that I see between myself and him there. Bill Belichick, obviously the greatest American football coach of all time. Just thinking about the game, his father's book about scouting methods inspired me quite a lot of how I observe Quidditch. And the psychology of the game, I was looking at Phil Jackson, who I know a lot of people have probably seen. In the Last Dance documentary, he has a really good book called 11 Rings, which goes on about building a championship winning team. Maybe 30 books written by players and coaches on my bookshelf that I think I've gleaned something from. So for me, it's about reading as much as possible. For Quidditch, obviously, it's the king of the coaching tree, Ash Cooper. Without Ash Cooper, there would be no coaches. He sits on the Mount Olympus of coaching for UK Quidditch. And without him, none of us as coaches would be here. So my man Ash Cooper has to get a shout out.
Thank you very much. You did mention a little bit there about the sort of psychology side of it you're quite interested in. I had one or two questions here, but I know that there's obviously, again, a lot more information, so we're going to do a separate sort of episode on that. Just while we're talking about the coaching, I have got some very specific questions, which I think are going to be one-word answers. You are in swim. You are 30 points up. Where do you put your bludgers?
Snitch.
Okay, hopefully that one's answered that one. Okay, so swim again. So you're 20 or 30 points down. Their chasers are stronger than yours.
Still snitch.
Where do you put
Still the snitch. It's still the snitch.
If you are in the game, if you can still win the game by catching the snitch,
it's the snitch.
It's the snitch.
Good.
If the other team can still win the game by catching the snitch, your beaters are on the snitch. It is only when the game is extreme one way or the other do the beaters go anywhere near the quaffle.
Okay, brilliant.
No worries.
Okay, so that being said then, so on the opposition there is a fantastic beater, for example. What is your best play to
lock them in the changing room?
Neutralize them.
Shall I start?
Can do.
So I think there's two ways you can look at this, and there's two ways that teams play this. So you've got a star player. You either put all of your resources into stopping them and hope that that neutralizes the entire team, or you put all of your resources into taking advantage of the rest of the field that they're not in and sort of absorb what they do and try and prevent it. There's some players that are so talented, you're never going to be able to stop them completely, but you can certainly limit how much of an impact they have on the game. Both have pros and cons. Obviously, if you don't put a lot of effort into stopping this player, they are probably going to blow up your offense and your defense quite a lot. But it does only mean one player is doing that, and you are limiting the other player's effectiveness. The flip side of this, you put your resources into stopping one player, the defense or the offense that player's on just going to adapt and attack you in other areas and limit your opportunities in other areas. Far too often we see, so for example with Raptors, teams put all of their resources into trying to stop Lucy, forgetting that Lucy has a partner that is also quite competent that just lights up the rest of their team instead. So I think you can adjust to a player who's very gifted, but putting your game plan around stopping them, like this, the field's too small just to ignore going on one side of the pitch. Like in American football, if their best player's on the left, I'm just going to play on the right. Quidditch doesn't have that luxury to an extent. So I think lots more teams need to worry about tightening up their own game rather than trying to adapt to the oppositions. James?
I agree. I have a preference for, like, depends how fit they are, like what their stamina's like. If I can run that person off the field, I'm going to do that. Like, so if I don't think their stamina's particularly good, I'm going to make them do as much running as I possibly can, especially if the rest of their team isn't particularly good, and they're much, much weaker without that person. If I can't do that, if it's someone who's just going to run the entire game and isn't going to stop regardless of what I do, I try and contain them by essentially trying to attack the rest of their team with the idea that every percentage play I have is smaller. So using the Lucy example, if I can't contain Lucy, Lucy's just going to be up on all my beaters. I'm going to try and pick on her partner and force her to be more conservative. Otherwise, her partner's going to get lit up. And obviously, that doesn't work if the partner's Mikey or Dad or whatever. But like, if that person is worse, that's where you pick and you try and contain them and make the good player adapt back and curb their enthusiasm slightly. But yeah, I'd rather run them off the park by just constantly making them run.
Okay, cool. I've got another one. During our 2-2 video, someone's watched it and they've asked, obviously we talked a little bit about how there's a weakness if you attack from the sides or you can switch forward and back. but we didn't. Well, they had some more questions really about exactly how do you stop that from happening. Now you know it's a weakness. What can you do to stop it?
It's about drilling, knowing that's a weakness ahead of time, and trying to plan out when you push to the side or to the back that you don't collapse entirely into that flat line. So if it does go out to the right wing, knowing that it's the hoop zone defender and, let's say, the previous half that have to push out, and everybody else needs to have to reform the formation, so you're swinging it round. Where it goes wrong is if only 2 people move and the rest stay, then you get your flat line. So you just have to practice that movement, that shifting around of the pitch, ball of the pitch. Where does it go? It's not perfect. Designating a player as a sweeper at the back of it is helpful, so they get way more freedom. It's what we do when the ball goes behind. Everybody else shifts back to and mirrors the formation, except for the furthest player, who then fills in any gap as literally just a free safety for the rest of the field to try and cut it out, and that stops someone getting an unchecked crash ball line to the hoops. But player movement's the key.
Cool. Lovely. So just got that last section. Do you want us to do on a different video and just have it as a second part? Because this is going to cut in a sec, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Let's take a break and we'll be back with you in a second.